If you're anything like me, you're either currently scared of roller coasters or have overcome that fear and cannot get enough of them. While the latter currently applies to me, I spent my fair share of years scared of the massive machines that line the midways of the many parks of America. Luckily for me, I was able to spend countless days during my childhood and teenage years at what I consider to be the perfect introductory park. A park that is capable of starting almost anybody on the path from scared to GP to enthusiast. That park is Six Flags Darien Lake. In order to understand why Darien Lake has the ideal lineup for people new to coasters, we have to look at its history. On average, Darien Lake changes ownership every 9 to 10 years, having exchanged hands 7 times since its opening in 1954, with most of those changes of ownership happening during the 2 coaster wars. If you aren't familiar with what a coaster war is, the term is used to describe a period in which parks are trying to break every record they can find. Tallest, fastest, longest, steepest, most inversions. If you can think of it, a park has tried to build their name on it. The first coaster war was kicked off in 1989 when the now bankrupt company Aerodynamics built the first hypercoaster, Magnum XL 200 at Cedar Point. Coming in at a height of 205 feet and a top speed of 72 miles per hour, Magnum smashed both the previous height and speed records held by Shockwave at Six Flags Great America by 35 feet and 7 miles per hour respectively. This addition to what was already considered to be a destination for thrill seekers across the world made other parks sweat and scramble to answer with records of their own. This energy launched the first coaster war. The height record would go on to be broken 7 more times in 14 years, ending with 2005's King de Ka, which holds the height record to this day at a monstrous 456 feet. The end of the first coaster war was cemented by the same park that began it when Cedar Point opened Maverick in 2007, a ride which stood at just 100 feet and had a top speed of 70 miles per hour. I personally waited for Maverick for over 3.5 hours opening week, as did many others. This proved to parks that there was a lot more to successful coasters than records, ending the first coaster war once and for all. The second coaster war was much more subtle and did not have a large impact on Darien Lake as of yet, so I'll keep details about it brief. Ushered in by 2 companies this time, the coaster war of the late 2010s and early 2020s has been more about making all enjoyable rides, as opposed to general record-breaking rides. Any records broken have to be broken down into subcategories such as tallest dive coaster and steepest hybrid coaster. These have been mostly driven by companies Bolliger and Mabillard, or B&M, and Rocky Mountain Construction, or RMC. All you need to know is that in the early 2010s, both of these companies truly picked up steam at different price ranges. RMC specializes in taking the structure of old wooden coasters, ripping off the track, and replacing it with steel track to make masterpieces of amusement engineering that appeal to those looking for a thrill. This is usually a relatively cheap process, costing less than $10 million for a hybrid conversion. B&M, on the other hand, makes expensive rides that appeal to the more GP audience. This isn't to say they're bad coasters by any stretch of the imagination, just that they in every way are designed to chum through park goers and keep people coming back. B&M makes a wide variety of coasters, including but not limited to dive coasters, which drop riders straight down towards the ground for an adrenaline-filled freefall experience, wing coasters, which hang riders off the side of the track for a more floaty and almost ethereal experience, hyper and giga coasters, which stand over 200 and 300 feet respectively and focus on speed and airtime, inverts, which hang riders below the track and offer a more intense ride experience, and loopers, which as the name implies, are designed to invert the rider as many times as the layout allows. Darien Lake's current lineup is a picturesque collection of a park passing hands amidst 2 coaster wars and trying to stay relevant through it all. Let's take a look at each relevant owner and what they added to the park during their time owning it to dive into that collection of coasters.
Hi, this is Rich Funky. Summer's vacation time, and TV10 wants you and your family of 4 to enjoy a free day at Darien Lake. All you do is send
Darien Lake got their first major roller coaster under the ownership of an investor named Paul Snyder. The coaster was the precursor to the major coaster war that Cedar Point began in 1989, as during this era, the only record that parks seemed to care about was inversions. Viper opened in 1982 as the first coaster in the world to flip riders upside down 5 times. Built by Aerodynamics, this ride featured a drop of 75 feet, which was quickly followed by a vertical loop, a batwing turn, and some meandering track before hitting the mid-course brake run. Upon passing the brakes, it inverted riders 2 more times with a double corkscrew before dipping through a tunnel and up into the final brake run. While I was not alive to experience this coaster's opening, my parents have told me that the line stretched out of its queue. Viper truly gave families and thrill seekers alike a reason to venture to Darien Lake. In 1983, Snyder sold 50% of the existing share of Darien Lake to Funtime Parks Incorporated, which soon brought big changes to the park. Darien Lake expanded its flat ride and shows collection through the mid-80s, adding multiple theaters and show venues along the way. Paul Snyder began to take more of a backseat role in the company, however he finally sold off the rest of his shares in 1990. He had his hand in one more upgrade along the way though.
It knows your terror. Preys on it. That's what it does. It's too big, too fast to escape. I warn you, it's out there now, stalking. It'll rip right through, throwing you high. It won't let up. It'll track you down, all right.
New York's largest wooden coaster is the Predator.
Predator opened in May 1990 as the park's second marquee thrill attraction. Though it would become known as one of the roughest roller coasters in the world later in its life, Predator was loved early on. Featuring a simple double out and back layout with ample airtime and respectable first drop, Darien Lake had another hit on their hands. As the first coaster wars ramped up, Funtime was purchased by Premier Parks, who took ownership of Darien Lake during a buyout in 1995. This began a period of prosperity for the park from 1996 through 1999. A new coaster was opened every year, starting with Nightmare at Phantom Cave, which only lasted until 1999 before being shipped off to the Great Escape. 1997 saw the addition of a Vekoma suspended looping coaster, or SLC, entitled Mind Eraser. This hung riders below the track, focusing on inversions and intensity. Boomerang Coast to Coaster opened in 1998, and as the name implies, it was a Vekoma Boomerang clone, which was extremely common at the time and remains an infamous model to this day. Between the 1998 and 1999 coaster editions, Premier made a big business move and purchased Six Flags, which officially made Darien Lake a Six Flags park for the first time. Come 1999, the park had a new name and a new coaster.
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Now, Superman soars. Superman, Ride of Steel. One of the tallest and fastest coasters in the world. Over 20 stories high, more than a mile long. A searing 10 seconds of weightlessness. Now at Six Flags, Darien.
Six Flags poured $12 million into the park, trusting Swiss manufacturer Intamin to make a world-class coaster. This move was considered a gamble at the time, as Intamin had never manufactured a hypercoaster, but boy did they deliver. Standing over 200 feet, Superman Ride of Steel was an airtime machine that rivaled even the best coasters in the world at the time, and still holds up to this day as a high-tier coaster. Unfortunately for park goers, this thrilling new coaster would be the end of editions for quite a while. In 2006, a glimmer of hope shined in the distance that came from the closing of Astroworld in Houston, Texas. Batman the Escape was moved to Darien Lake and put into storage with the possible intention of being built, but this hope was quickly destroyed 1 month into the season when Six Flags announced that they were considering selling the park. This consideration became a reality in October of that year when the park decided to indeed put it up for sale. 3 short months later, a deal was struck with the next owner in this twisted line of custody, Park Management. Park Management acted as quickly as they could to add a new roller coaster to their park. 2008 introduced Orange County Chopper's Moto Coaster, a Zamperla launch coaster that was initially the prototype for this model and was literally sitting outside of their factory in Italy before Darien Lake bought it. This unofficially marked a changing point in Darien Lake's business strategy. They began focusing much more on the water park and flat ride collection as the first coaster war had officially ended. Park came and went with no further additions, as did the next owner, Hershin Family Entertainment. Premier Parks LLC bought the park in 2014 and seemed to have no interest in coasters either. This changed quickly in 2018, however. In what can only be assumed to be a Hail Mary attempt by a company attempting to keep their park relevant, Premier Parks LLC added a Gerstlauer Eurofighter called Tantrum in early 2018 to open as the season began. Unfortunately for Premier, the Hail Mary attempt did not work, and a familiar face bought the lease rights to the park in May 2018, Six Flags. That's right, Premier Parks turned into Six Flags in the 1990s, and Premier Parks LLC sold the park to Six Flags in 2018. What are the odds? With that anecdote aside, Tantrum was the first coaster in 10 years to be added to Darien Lake, and the question remained as to whether it would be a crowd draw. Featuring a 97-degree drop, 3 quick inversions, and a short track length with a quick ride time, Tantrum certainly proved to be popular. As of 2022, it regularly has lines longer than even the biggest ride in the park, though that can probably be attributed to its capacity of 8 riders per car. The only question that remained going forward was whether or not Six Flags would continue to invest in this park. Luckily, the answer seems to be yes. With the announcement of GCI's Steel Titan track in 2020, designed to make rough coasters smooth again by adding steel, it was heavily rumored that Six Flags was spending the money to make Predator smooth once again. This would see 2 years of delay due to the pandemic, but on opening day 2022, Predator debuted its new Titan track section. Park management has told me that if the section received well, more money might be put into the Titan track to smooth out even more parts of this ride. 2022 is the first time in 15 years that I have personally seen Predator be more than a station wait, or more than a walk-on for that matter. This seems to show that reception for Titan Track is favorable to parkgoers. All of that history may seem inconsequential to my point of Darien Lake being the perfect introductory park, but we have to look at the coaster collection in depth before I could even begin to introduce a concept that I have never seen another coaster YouTuber cover: escalation. Most creators in this niche are enthusiasts already. We don't stop to think about the overall ease to approach a coaster lineup because we're used to marathoning rides like Skyrush, Steel Vengeance, Millennium Force, I-305, and many more. And since we're familiar with walking into a park and dominating the most intense ride, escalation isn't a thought. I define escalation as how approachable a park is from its weakest or most tame coaster, ramping up to its biggest show-stopping coaster. A park with perfect escalation will have someone walking in being comfortable with the weakest coaster only, and walking out having tried most if not all of them. With that said, a park having great escalation in no way means that it has an amazing lineup, and vice versa. For example, Cedar Point is my favorite park, tied with Kings Island. However, it has atrocious escalation. I thought of this while waiting in line for Cedar Creek Mine Ride during Coaster Mania. The family in front of me had a daughter that I estimated to be about 8 to 10 years old, who loved to chat with everybody about how great Cedar Creek was and how it was her favorite ride. After talking to her mother for a bit, I learned that the girl was tall enough to ride every coaster in the park, but every other coaster was way too intimidating for her. This got me thinking about the lineup overall and how unfriendly it is to people afraid of coasters that want to get over their fear. People are often afraid of a few things on roller coasters. I find the most common fears to be heights, restraint anxiety, drops, and inversions. While you could escalate all of these fears through Cedar Point, you would have some major jumps to take along the way. The bottom few in every category are easy enough to find, but after that it gets scary. Darien Lake, on the other hand, is easily approachable for every major fear. I know this because I've guided many people through all of the main fears at this park with great success, most recently, my fiancée. She suffered from restraint anxiety and general distaste for heights, so I chose the order of coasters very carefully. First we rode Predator as it has a chunky ratcheting lap bar with seatbelts, which allowed her to experience some airtime while feeling comfortable. From there, we went over to Viper. It's about 20 feet taller than Predator, however it has a smaller drop and over-the-shoulder restraints, so she felt secure. After she was comfortable on Viper, we headed over to Tantrum. Since I knew she could handle an inversion and being 100 feet off the ground, I chose this to give her the same forces and experience she was comfortable with, but with a lap bar instead of over-the-shoulder restraints. We stopped by Mind Eraser after Tantrum at her request as she was getting a little more adventurous. I heard it had new trains for the season, but it was still a headbanger, so I taught her how to ride defensively. After that mess, we headed over to Boomerang to experience more intensity and to truly prepare her for what this was all leading up to. We finally boarded Ride of Steel, formerly Superman Ride of Steel, to combine all of what she learned into one ride and tackle her distaste for heights. After her first ride, she was admittedly terrified, but she did want to ride again, and after that second ride, she was cured of her fear of coasters. The following weekend, we went to Canada's Wonderland and Cedar Point, and she handled every ride like a champ, going on to ride 60 coasters this summer, including 3 Gigas, 7 Hypers, and plenty of intense coasters. This general plan can be adapted for anyone. Fine with drops and heights but have an inversion anxiety? Go Predator, Ride of Steel, Motocoaster, Boomerang, Viper, then Tantrum. It truly is customizable for anything. Is Six Flags Darien Lake a perfect park? Heck no. Far from it, in fact. As an enthusiast, it would not be my second most visited park this season after only Cedar Point if I didn't live 30 minutes away from it. I would visit once, grab all the credits, and never return. I do dare say it is the perfect park to get someone into coasters and over their fear of coasters. It handles escalation better than any other park I've seen, which is saying a lot. Let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have made it this far without yelling at your screen, consider subscribing. I'm Josh from Station Wait. Have a great week.